In this presentation, we look at a restless and passionate poet of painting, thoroughly individualist from the start. It was the great period of creative personalities in America that, shining among them all, a remarkable spirit and a remarkable painter, was Abbott Handerson Thayer. But what do we know about him? How and in what way did he differ from the artists of his time? One writer stated, "We have never had anyone more original in character, or richer in imaginative genius. He was a naturalist as well as an artist, a master of truth as well as of beauty, equally searching and eloquent in the interpretation of landscape and in the delineation of the figure." He goes on to say, "To dwell upon his career is to dwell upon some of the most precious elements in the history of American art." Abbott Handerson Thayer was born in Boston in 1849. However, he was reared in nearby New Hampshire in the town of Keene. By mid-century, Keene was a thriving village, with a population of about 3,300 people. But by the time he was in his later teens, the family moved to Brooklyn, New York. It was there that he began in earnest to study painting and later attended the Academy of Design in New York City. It was about this time he was thinking of pursuing animal painting as his specialty of genre. And so it was that Abbott was to make a further jump. Into the more serious study he decided to go to Paris, where he entered the atelier of Jean-Léon Gérôme. The year was 1875, and he was 26. While at the École des Beaux-Arts, he remained very true to his own thoughts and ideas, and it should be noted that while Gérôme was decidedly a great and knowledgeable painter in the academic tradition, his teaching reflected a very broad approach. It was a situation where within the classes students were permitted to pursue individual interests of contemporary subjects and apart from any strict formula. Abbott, it can be said, chose the independent direction, and he showed little influence of the academy ideals except for the skill to draw well. His obvious skill at modelling was apparent as well. There is no doubt he was his own person, with intensely personal passions to work out. His pursuit of animal painting continued, but he began to paint the female as almost angelic, often with wings that reflected many moods, goddesses, mournful, meditative, and protective. In his painting of Caritas we find the heroic protector of children, as she extends her arms over little cherubs. He would often return to that type of subject over and over again. One smiles at the thought of Gérôme, because Abbott forgot Paris of the école system and practices, as though he had never been there. But he hadn't entirely turned his back on the idioms of the école, but ironically used instead the large utterance of those early gods of the school, where he speaks straight from his heart. It is the deep feeling in him that more than anything else makes him unique. It remained a romantic side of his views. His uniqueness was not unlike that of Rodin, John Lafarge, and James Whistler, all of whom had very distinctive styles and followed a path each his own. It may be said Abbott was in pursuit of beauty. "How you set me talking," he wrote. "As to what my pictures mean you see now exactly. I want the image of one I worship to become visible for all time to this world." It was further noted, his New England origin must have counted, pens one critic, in his growth as a naturalist, but in matters of art he was of another country. Perhaps Fromentin's "art is nature seen through a temperament" is practically sufficient, in a word, but what great art means is that it comes out of its matrix consisting of only such and so much a figure in action, colour, etc., as went to make the cherished image that love has set growing in the heart. In Abbott's romantic views of pictures, let the painter once look upon a person who has, beneath no matter how many surface defects, one dominant greatness, a purity at heart and fiery love of truth and beauty, and in his own heart the image of such a personality wake into brilliant ringing clearness, and takes the helm, saying, "Watch this being. Thou wilt surely see now and then the being she really is. Come forth and be fully in sight. Watch then, and take in how she looks, for in those aroused moments she dominates the whole face and body, ruling all their details into her heavenly form. He continues, "Now he who in this way comes to know her, looks thereafter, waits, no matter how long. When he finds himself at the end of his last supply, he waits, as it were, outside her window, sure that when she once more stands there in his sight, he will quickly see how to go on with his picture of her. You see, dear courtiseuses, this is absolutely the way I work. You delineate it most clearly, and it is because you see it that I feel I could crystallize it for you a little more. The whole trade of art and literature is for the time off the planet. Man, finding himself up against that, if he knew it, greatest blessing, the obvious impossibility of ever understanding existence, will forever swing between periods of worship and periods like our present one. So with man, his epochs of worship will always be followed by a period, such as we are now somewhere near the end of, that of self-deluding digging, egged on by the elation of unearthing so many of the never-before-dreamed-of tools that God evidently uses: gravitation, steam, electricity, radium, etc. Abbott goes on with his highly searching thoughts as to what life is. He continues, "The world is now all for what they call science, and they weigh music, painting, and poetry by what it can do in this field, as we can see by Abbott's words to his friends that he was always after a personal ideal that he could sum up in pictures. This has consistently been the plight of the creative maker of and within the arts. A longing to triumph over a thought, an inspiration, an object in nature that is so moving, one wishes to seize the brushes and get it more perfectly down as possible. These foregoing observations do much to explain the nominally restricted range of Abbott's artwork. In the list of his works, not particularly voluminous, with such titles as Winged Figure, The Virgin, Caritas, Diana, and Young Woman, point to the celebration of one theme, that of womanhood endowed with beauty. They are profoundly human presences. It is by character, by qualities of the soul, that they succeed, not through any dramatic or other significance derived from a specific pictorial ingenuity. He was not a great inventive designer. He was just the consummate interpreter of a grand ideal of form. He was too impatient of material issues ever to become a merely adroit craftsman. Abbott was technically a man of superb passages and of careless ones. He would paint a head with the supreme authority of an old master, an arm with the same imperial skill, or a drapery, and then he would brush in a part of his background as though he were in a hurry to get through. There are parts of some of his finest things that look unfinished, but they are never the essential parts. The beauty which he set out to express is always there. Now let's turn to the picture of Monadnock. It is one of the greatest landscapes ever painted in America or anywhere else, considers one critic. The foreground is roughly generalized, on a principle which Corot used before Abbott, but which few have appreciated at its full value. The great mass and the shining crown of the mountain are defined with equal delicacy, precision, and grandeur. The masterpiece is characteristic of Thayer. It is original. Few other landscape painters are as impressive as this one could have set down a more personal impression of nature. Abbott, as one can see, was enthusiastically supported by many of his unique qualities as a painter and poet of nature's beauty. In those early days in which he painted portraits of dogs and other animals, he gave that occupation up, but went on studying beasts and birds more and more as he retired to what was to prove his permanent home at Monadnock, New Hampshire. Presently there flowed from those studies an epoch-making discovery. It is the law of protective coloration, that strange principle in nature which gives to some at least of the creatures of the wild a safeguard without which they would be handicapped in the struggle for existence. From time to time he made supplementary communications on the subject, and in 1909, under the title of Concealing Coloration in the Animal Kingdom, a full exposition of his ideas was published by this naturalist. Its fame has since been greatly heightened by the fact that by the application of Thayer's law, the art of camouflage was brought into the Great War or World War I. He lived by imagination. If ever a man did, he wrote to a friend of great events that swept him like a storm. Here it should be noted he is referring to the Titanic loss and the Great War. And afterward, fortunately, they sent him back to the brush. I am young again and really painting. You will rejoice that I have this last May done one of my very best heads. I am very well again, and conceive that the things I am painting are going to please you and me. I am full of them. These are the messages from Abbott that I love best to recall. When he says, I am full of them, he means only one thing, that he is full of his ideals of beauty. He was faithful to them to the end. In pure beauty, this remarkable artist left to America his truest heritage. In 1891, his first wife, Kate Blode, died. Her loss changed Abbott's art and his outlook on life in virtually every respect. Her family, intellectually and artistically, were distinguished German émigrés who had introduced him to the romantic world of literature, music, and philosophy. In 1901, Abbott decided to leave New York and settled in Dublin, New Hampshire, joining a colony of artists, writers, scientists, and cultural figures living near Mount Monadnock. Rejecting the hectic pace of urban life, he built a family complex within the Dublin colony. He married his longtime friend, Emma Beach, and with his 3 children, they lived and worked in a complex of studios, barns, houses, and unheated sleeping huts. He turned more and more to reflective and familiar subjects, including portraits of close friends and family, and views of Mount Monadnock. And finally, we hope you enjoyed this look at one of the most intriguing artists that America has produced. He was an original. He had a unique way of summarizing his thoughts on beauty, and while he was always searching, he did in fact leave us our opportunity to look within his often sketchy works as if we could follow his quest with him. His pictures are remarkable for brevity and technical loveliness. And so with that, we look to bring you more works by highly skilled artists, thanks to our subscribers, and please remember to add a like. So, until next time, bye for now.